Shabbos Daf Hey begins in the middle of a discussion that the Gemara was discussing. The Gemara was asking, is that how is it possible that in the Mishnah, which we learned at the beginning of the Masechta, an Akira and Hanacha could be accomplished by transferring an object from hand to hand? Don't we have a halacha that Akira and a Hanacha has to be done on a surface 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim? So the Gemara is in the middle of trying to find solutions to that. The Gemara will bring a few opinions of Tanaim which apparently do not hold of this halacha, and the Gemara will try to say that the Mishnah goes according to each of them. The Gemara will reject each of them. The Gemara will then look for other answers, such as finding a way to explain our Mishnah that there actually is a 4 tefach by 4 tefach surface, or that a 4 tefach by 4 tefach surface is not needed for these akiras or hanachas. When the Gemara finishes that, the Gemara will have a statement of Rabbi Yochanan, and then for the rest of the daf, the Gemara will quote various different questions or statements or halachas that Rabbi Yochanan had said, or people said in his name, concerning interesting types of funny akiras or hanachas. The Gemara will try to question each one. Why does this count as akira? Why does it count as a hanacha? Or why does it not? At the end of the daf, the Gemara will bring a brisa with a similar kind of statement, which again sums up in a statement of Rabbi Yochanan. So let's go to the beginning of the daf. We were in the middle of discussing a question on the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that you can have a object transferred from a poor person to a homeowner across a fence, or vice versa, and the object is transferred from hand to hand, either transferred from hand to hand to start its journey across the fence from one rishus to another, or it ends its journey by transferring from hand to hand, which we call akira or hanacha. The starting of the trip is called akira, the ending is called hanacha. You cannot violate the halacha of carrying on Shabbos Daf unless you have both a akira and a hanacha. Now the Gemara had said that there's a rule that an akira has to be lifted off a surface which is 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim, otherwise it doesn't count as an akira. And hanacha, where you're bringing the object to rest, has to be onto a surface which is 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim. And the Gemara had asked, if it's being passed from hand to hand to accomplish the akira or the hanacha, that's not a 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim surface. A hand is much smaller. So how is it that you can count them as akira and hanacha if it's not 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim? So the Gemara is trying to find opinions of Tanaim who don't hold of that 4 tvachim halacha, and say that our Mishnah is going according to those opinions. So the one which we just read at the end of the previous daf is that of Rebbe. The Gemara had quoted a statement of Rebbe, which argues on the Chachamim, the cases where somebody threw an object from one Rishos HaRabim to another Rishos HaRabim, crossing over a Rishos Yachin in between. And Rebbe had said that the person who threw it is violating Hilchos Shabbos twice, because as it passes above the Rishos Yachin, it's considered like it stopped. Halachically, it's viewed as if it stopped there, and therefore there was 2 separate carryings. There was one from the Rishos HaYachid that it originated into the Rishos HaRabim, that it passed over and it's viewed as it stopped, and then it begins again over there halachically and passes into the Rishos HaYachid that it finally lands in. So you see that there are 2 violations of Shabbos. It means that there is both an akira and hanacha in the Rishos HaYachid that is passing over, which means that Rebbe holds obviously that you do not need a 4 tefach by 4 tefach surface, because if it's flying through, it's definitely not viewed as landing on a 4 tefach by 4 tefach surface. So the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says that statement of Rebbe does not adequately explain the Mishnah, because Rebbe is talking about a place where the Rishos HaYachid that it flew over was roofed. And we have a statement that we learned that a roofed Rishos HaYachid, where it's enclosed on all sides, is considered to be filled up with objects. Halachically, it's viewed as if it's full. And if it's full, then the object which is flying over it is considered to be resting, when it stops, halachically, on that full Rishos HaYachid. And therefore, it actually is halachically viewed as if it rested on a 4 tefach by 4 tefach surface, because the Rishos HaYachid is filled up all the way to the top. And therefore, that would not help us in our case. Rebbe's halacha does not say that you do not have to have a 4 tefach surface, and in our case of hand to hand, you still would need 4 tvachim, and it still shouldn't count as a halachic akira and hanacha. So the Gemara says, maybe you'll tell me that our Mishnah was also talking about a roofed Rishos HaYachid, and that's why the akira counts, because it's considered to be filled up. Halachically, it's viewed as filled up, and therefore when it lands or departs from a hand standing in Rishos HaYachid, it's as if it was on a 4 tefach by 4 tefach surface, because it's considered to be filled up. The Gemara says that's great as far as Rishos HaYachid. However, we also had the case of the object starting or ending in Rishos HaRabim. And you cannot have a roofed Rishos HaRabim. We have a clear halacha Rav and Shmuel bar Yehuda said in the name of Rav Abba and the name of Rav Huna that a roofed Rishos Harabim doesn't count as a Rishos Harabim. Rishos Harabim has to be similar to the encampment of the Jews in the desert. That's where we learn the halachas of Rishos Harabim from. That's how we define it. And there it wasn't roofed, so here it couldn't possibly be roofed. So the Rishos Harabim couldn't possibly be roofed. And we're back to the question we had when the object begins or ends in Rishos Harabim, it can't be roofed, and therefore it doesn't have 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. So the Gemara looks for another Tana who could possibly be this Mishnah, who doesn't require 4 by 4 for Akira and Hanacha. And the Gemara says, well, there's the statement of Acherim. Acherim is usually referring to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Acherim has the following halacha. Let's say you have a quarterback who throws something, and it's caught by the receiver. So if the receiver is stationary when he catches it, and obviously he's in a different reshus than the quarterback who threw it, so the receiver, if he's not moving, is not doing anything. He's not really participating, and the Akira transfer, Hanacha, was all accomplished by the person who threw it, which we'll call the quarterback, and therefore he is the one who violates Shabbos completely. However, if the receiver runs towards the quarterback, and he catches it in stride, then when he stops moving, he did the Hanacha, and he is a full participant, therefore neither of them violate Shabbos completely deraisa, because none of them did the full set of Akira, transfer, and Hanacha. Now here you see clearly that the receiver can accomplish the Hanacha even though he caught it in his hand, and the hand, like you said, is not 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. So this opinion clearly holds you do not have to have 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and that could be the author of our Mishnah. Now the Gemara rejects this for 2 reasons. First of all, the Gemara says this only tells you that a Hanacha can be accomplished with a hand less than 4 tefachim. It does not tell you that an Akira can be accomplished from a hand of less than 4 tefachim. So it doesn't really help our Mishnah. As we saw earlier, just because you hold of Hanacha doesn't mean you hold of Akira on less than 4 tefachim. Second of all, who told you that he caught it in his hand? Maybe he caught it in his jacket or a other surface which he spread out that was 4 tefachim wide. So the Gemara gives up on trying to find a Tana that doesn't hold of the 4 tefachim halacha. Then the Gemara says we'll find other ways to explain the Mishnah, that the Mishnah's case was there really was 4 tefachim, even though it says hand to hand. So the Gemara first wants to say, okay, it wasn't really hand to hand, it was really the hand was holding a basket, and the basket had a surface 4 tefachim wide, and it had walls. So the Gemara says this, okay, that would work, it would solve the problem, but it doesn't fit with the Shita of Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda. Because he says that if you have a basket suspended in the air or stuck on a stick, and it's above 10 tefachim, the basket counts as a Rishos HaYachid. So in the case where you have the Akira and Hanacha happening in Rishos HaRabim, if it's in a basket, it's not really Rishos HaRabim, it's Rishos HaYachid. Now, what is the reason that Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda says that a basket counts as a Rishos HaYachid? The halacha is as follows. When we define Rishos HaYachid and Rishos HaRabim in Hilchos Shabbos, we're not talking about a public domain or a private domain literally. It's defined by the shape of the object. Rishos HaYachid is defined as a surface, which is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and it is surrounded by walls either extending upwards from the surface or extending downwards from the surface that have a height of 10 tefachim. Now this basket is 4 tefachim, obviously we said, and it has walls. The walls are halachically viewed as if they extend all the way to the ground. So if it's 10 tefachim above the ground, the walls are viewed as if they extend all the way to the ground, making the surface of the basket into a Rishos HaYachid. So this couldn't fit with him. So the Gemara says, no, really, I'll tell you that this could fit with him. The transfer that happened from hand to basket was referring to when the basket was below 10 tefachim from the ground. Therefore, even if you'll view those walls of the basket as if they're extending all the way to the ground, halachically, it's still not a Rishos HaYachid, because the walls, even the invisible, imaginary walls, are not 10 tefachim high. So the says, okay, that solves the problem. However, that involves a little bit of a stretch, and that you have to say that when it says it from hand to hand, it means from hand to basket. The Gemara is prepared to accept that, but the Gemara notes that Rabbi Avo is not prepared to accept that, and he therefore wants to offer a different answer. He says what's actually happening was that the person's hand is within three tefachim of the ground. The halacha is anything within 3 tefachim of the ground is considered lying on the ground. So if his hand that the transfer, the Akira and the Hanacha was involved in, was within 3 tefachim of the ground, it would be considered on the ground, and therefore the Akira and the Hanacha halachically actually happened on the ground, which of course is 4 tefachim wide, and therefore that would be enough. The Gemara asks, but what do you mean? How could his hand be within 3 tefachim of the ground? In order for that to happen, it would have to be seated. And the Mishnah said that somebody's standing in the Rishos HaRabim or Rishos HaYachid. So it doesn't fit. The Gemara says, okay, there's three cases where you could be standing and still have your hand be within 3 tvachim of the ground. Either you're leaning over very low, or you are very short, like a midget, or you're standing in a hole, and therefore your hand is 3 tvachim of the surface of the outside of the hole. The Gemara says, Rava says, this is getting ridiculous already. Why would the Tana teach us a simple halacha about transferring from Rishus to Rishus in such a crazy far-out case where you have to stretch and come up with all kinds of gymnastics to figure out what the case is? There's a much simpler explanation. And Rava says as follows. Rava says that the whole halacha, 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim, is accomplished when you have a hand. What's the reason for akiras and hanachas having to be on 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim? Because you cannot view an object's resting place in a surface which is less than 4 tvachim. That is not a permanent long-term solution. It's not considered like it stays there. It's obviously going to be moved off. So if it's on a 4 tvachim surface, it's still in transit. It's not akira, it's not a hanacha. However, a hand is not in transit. A hand grasps the object. It's not on its way off. A hand therefore counts halachically as accomplishing the same thing as a 4 tefach wide surface, and it can count for akira and hanacha even though it's actually smaller. Gemara says you can even see this halacha from the statement of Rabbi Yochanan that if somebody throws an object and then lands in his friend's hand, his friend catches it, it counts as akira and hanacha. So you see that a hand counts as 4 amas even though it's actually smaller. Now the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan seemed to say this again, that if somebody throws an object and the other person isn't even paying attention and just lands there, it still counts as a complete hanacha and the thrower violated Shabbos Daf. Now the Gemara notes that Rabbi Yochanan says the same halacha again with one slight variation, that the thrower did not intend for it to land in the receiver's hand, it just fell there by coincidence. The Gemara wants to know why is it repeated. The Gemara says you may have thought that somebody has to intend for the hand to count as 4 amas in order for it to, as 4 tvachim in order for it to do so. And Rabbi Yochanan is saying that no, the hand counts as 4 tvachim even if you did not intend it to do so. That's why he says the second case. Now the Gemara quotes a number of other statements and halachas and even questions that Rabbi Yochanan said about akiras and hanachas. The first one is the case which we saw earlier, that if a quarterback threw to a receiver in motion, it doesn't count as if the quarterback did the hanacha. It's the receiver who did the hanacha when he stops. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah we saw earlier, which actually says that halacha. Next, Rabbi Yochanan asks, what if somebody throws an object in the air and it's coming down 4 amas away, which would count as a full akira transfer and hanacha? 4 amas in one Rishus, in Rishus Harabim, counts as a transfer, but then the original thrower goes to the spot where it's about to land and he catches it. So he wants to know, Rabbi Yochanan, does that count as a hanacha or not? Now the Gemara asks, what's the question? The Gemara explains, normally if he would throw it himself and it would fall and he would land, his one action accomplished both the akira, the transfer, and the hanacha. However, over here, he went and he counteracted his original throwing by stopping it, by catching it. In that sense, he's competing with what he did before. So it's possible that we would then view the two actions as being done by 2 separate people. Even though it's done by one person, it would be ascribed as if because they're conflicting, it would be as if 2 separate people have accomplished them. We would not ascribe them both to the same person, even though the same person has done them, and therefore we would not be mechayev him for it. Gemara says that question will stand. We don't have an answer. Another statement of Rabbi Yochanan, he said that if somebody sticks his hand from his Rishus Harabim where he is across the fence into his neighbor's yard, and he catches rainwater and brings it back to his yard, he's chayav for that. The Gemara says, how could that be? In our Mishnah we said that if the person standing there places the object into his hand, he's not chayav for that because it's not considered like he did an akira. So here, if the rainwater fell into his hand, why should it be any different than that? He also didn't do an akira. So the Gemara answer is, okay, the case is where he used one hand to direct the water into the other hand. Therefore, he's the one who did the akira. It didn't fall in there on its own. So the Gemara says, you don't have an akira from a 4 tefach wide surface. So the Gemara answer is, okay, the water was flowing down the wall, and he scooped it up from there. There's your 4 tefachim wide surface. So the Gemara says, but if it's flowing on the wall, then it's considered to be in motion, so it's not an akira. He didn't put it into transit. So the Gemara says, so it's like Rava says, that it was a sloped wall. If it's a sloped wall, even though it's moving slowly, and therefore it counts as if he did an akira. Now the Gemara wants to know, where is this halacha of Rava? The Gemara says the halacha of Rava was in the following case. We have a Mishnah that says, what happens if somebody is holding a scroll and he drops one end of the scroll and it rolls away from him? So now, midaraisa, you only violate the halacha of Shabbos if you drop the scroll completely and then you go bring it from the rishus that it fell into the rishus that you are in. Midarabanan, however, if you roll it up from the end that you are still holding, you would be violating Hilchos Shabbos. However, the Rabbanan are only going to say the Gzeira if the two rishus that you are in, the one that you're in and the one that the scroll rolled into, are ones which you could actually violate Hilchos Shabbos Daraisa if it had fallen completely. Then they would say that you can't roll it even midarabanan. However, if you would not violate Hilchos Shabbos Daraisa anyway, even if it had fallen, because the two rishuyos are such that it's not a violation of Hilchos Shabbos Daraisa, then you would be allowed to roll it up from the end that you are holding. What's the case? So if you're standing on a karmelis, which is like a stoop, and it rolls to a rishus harabim, so from karmelis to a rishus harabim, or vice versa, is only derabanan, so they said you're allowed to roll it up since you're holding one end. If you're standing on a roof, which is a rishus yachid, and it rolls down, and it's hanging in midair, but it's more than 10 tvachim above the ground, so that's also from a rishus yachid to a makom pitur, so there's no isser there, so you would be allowed to roll it up. If, however, it stretches from your hand on the roof all the way down to within 10 tvachim of the floor, that's from rishus hayachid of the roof to rishus harabim of the floor, then it would be forbidden. You would have to leave it lying there just to turn it over so that the letters aren't facing outward and it shouldn't come to disgrace. Now the Gemara says, but hold on a second, why is that considered to be carrying the eraisa from the roof to rishus harabim? It's suspended in midair, it didn't stop, so there's no hanacha. So the Gemara says that Rava says because it's lying on a sloped wall, it's considered like it stopped moving. So this is the same halacha over here. The water that's running along the sloped wall is considered like it stopped moving. The Gemara asks, it's very different, it's not the same. A scroll can stop on a sloped wall. Gravity is not that strong, it's got friction. The water will keep running for sure. That's not considered like it stopped. So the Gemara says, you're right, we're going to reject this. To figure out a different explanation of what Rav Yechanan's case was, the Gemara says that what happened was that you had rainwater falling into a hole and you scooped off the top part of the water. So you didn't actually bring water that was lying at rest in the other rishus into your rishus. You took water that was on top of other water. So it shows that even though it's on top of other water, it is considered to be at rest, and the fact that you brought it into your rishus is a violation of Hilchos Shabbos. The Gemara brings a similar statement in the name of Rava. Water on top of water is considered to be at rest. However, a nut floating in the water is not considered to be at rest. Now the Gemara has a shayla here. What if somebody has a nut sitting in a plate and the plate is floating on the water? Do you say that the nut is at rest in the plate, or do you say that the entire thing is considered to be in transit because it's floating on the water? As we'll leave that standing, we have another question. What about oil which is floating on water? Meaning you poured oil and water into the same cup and the oil floats to the surface. Is that considered to be floating in the water and therefore it's in motion, or is it considered to be at rest on the water, which would be accomplished by the water and the oil being considered to be one unit? The Gemara says this is dependent on a machlokes we saw elsewhere in Hilchos Tumah. Halacha is that a tful yom, somebody who has been to the mikveh but has not achieved full tahar yet because the sun hasn't set, if he touches oil floating on the surface of water, he's metame the oil. The question is he metame the water or not? It's a machlokes whether the water and the oil are considered to be one unit, and that same machlokes would apply here as to whether the oil is considered to be one unit with the water and therefore it's at rest, or it's a separate unit and therefore it's still in motion on the surface of the water. The Gemara quotes another statement of Rabbi Yechanan about Akiras. It's Rav Avin in the name of Rav Elo in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. It says that if somebody lifts up a package of food and drink with intent not to carry it outside of his Rishos HaYachid, just to walk around within it, and then he changes his mind once he's in motion and he walks outside, the Gemara says even if he walks back and forth from Rishos HaYachid to Rishos Rabbim all day, he will never violate Shabbos Daraisa, because his Akira that he did was without intent to leave the Rishos HaYachid, and therefore that is not an Akira with Malachas Machsheves, with intent to commit the violation of Shabbos, and he won't violate Shabbos Daraisa until he stops walking in order to rest. Once he does that, it's considered to be like he stopped, and when he starts walking again, that's Akira, and if he does that with intent to leave the Rishos, that is considered a violation of Shabbos. Now, it's only if he stops to rest. If he stops to adjust the package, that's not considered to be a real stop, and it's not a real Hanacha with a new Akira afterwards. The Gemara proves that from the following statement. We saw that if somebody's walking 4 amas carrying an object in Rishos Harabim, so walking 4 amas counts as a transfer from Rishos to Rishos, and therefore it is a violation of the halacha of carrying. However, if he stops along the way within the 4 amas in order to adjust the package, it's not counted as if he stopped, and therefore when he stops later, it will be a full 4 amma walk without stopping, and it will be a violation of Hilchos Shabbos. But if he stops to rest in the middle, then it is a stopping, and when he starts again, it's a new walk, and therefore the 2 walks are less than 4 amas, and that does not violate Hilchos Shabbos Daraisa, only Darabanan. And again, we have seen that Stopping to rest counts as a stopping as a hanacha and a nu akira, but stopping to adjust does not. Now the Gemara quotes another version of the statement of Rav Yochanan. It's from Safar Leim Rav Ami. And here, instead of discussing food and drink, they discuss objects. The Gemara wants to know, why did we need Rabbi Yochanan to say the same thing twice? The Gemara says he didn't. He said it only once, but the different Amoraim saying it over heard it differently, and therefore they said it in different language. But really, the statement was only said by Rabbi Yochanan once.